I was wrong about the DJI RS3 Mini. I thought it was powerful enough for my needs, but it turns out I had to get the RS4, and I'll tell you exactly why and show you how I'm rigging it out now. All right, let's dive in. One of the main reasons I couldn't use the RS3 Mini anymore is that every time I wanted to mount my camera on it, I had to take off the camera cage and use a much lighter lens. I really couldn't use any of my manual lenses. And this was fine when I wanted to run with just the bare FX3 and the 16-35 or 24-70 G Master lenses, and that's it. Once I started to add anything else, the weight was too much for the gimbal and I couldn't get it to balance. And the next big reason is the battery life. What they have on the website just is not true. I usually could get about 3 to 4 hours of battery life out of that gimbal, and that just does not cut it, especially when you have a really long shoot day, you're shooting a live event or a wedding, something like that. Your gimbal has got to last all day. And finally, there was no good way to add a follow focus motor and focus wheel to the RS3 Mini. So if I needed to shoot on a manual focus lens, I just really couldn't. Ultimately, I ran with the RS3 Mini setup for a year, but it came to a breaking point where I needed to be able to use some other gear. What I have set up already is the Sony FX3 in a small rig cage, and then I have it on the DJI plate that comes with the gimbal, and I'm rocking the Greatjoy 50mm anamorphic lens today because I want to show you how you can use manual focus lenses with this. And of course, I've got the Canon EF to E-mount adapter so that I can use this on my Sony camera. Let's go ahead and mount the camera on the gimbal. One of the first things I add to every single camera setup I do is a variable ND filter. And this is the Polar Pro Helix Maglock. I really like this one because it just magnetizes to the front like that, and then it locks in, and you don't have to screw it on and off every time. And it is a variable ND filter, so you can dial in exactly the exposure that you need really quickly. Of course, you've got to have this if you're shooting out on a bright sunny day and you want to keep your shutter angle at that 180-degree rule. The next thing I always add to my gimbal setup is an external monitor, because you know how difficult it is to actually nail your focus when you're moving around quickly on a gimbal, especially if you're using manual focus, and getting the exposure right too is really challenging. I'll show you exactly what I'm using. This is a little small rig monitor mount, and it's built specifically for the DJI RS series. I know it works on the RS3 and the RS3 Pro, the RS4 and the RS4 Pro, but if it works with any other ones, I'll put them all on the list here. I really love this thing. It's super easy to put on. You just slide it on like this, no tools, and then tighten it into place. Now let's go ahead and add the monitor. And what I'm using today is the Atomos Ninja 5. And I really like this monitor because you can record externally to it over HDMI. And what I like to do is shoot in ProRes anytime that I can. I'm not doing this every time, but it really is convenient to be able to shoot on SSDs and then go plug them right into your hard drive and drop the footage really quickly. So I'll go ahead and mount this up, and I have an 8-sin cage on there. This cage keeps it protected in case I accidentally drop it or something, but it has a ton of 1/4-20 threads on it. So this will allow me to just go ahead and screw this right into place and plug in our HDMI cable. Now, if I wasn't using a manual focus lens, I would stop here if I was using autofocus. And I would just run with this monitor that you can tilt any direction so it's easy to see. And this would be a perfect setup for shooting all day long. But because this is a manual focus lens, we got to throw a focus motor on here. So instead of using the focus motor that DJI created, I like to use the Tilta ones because you can use the hand wheel separate and you can use this on a totally different handheld camera rig. So to me, that's a huge advantage. This is the new Nucleus Nano II. I had the original 1 series. Both of them are pretty good, and I've actually made a full comparison video of it if you want to learn a little bit more about this. Mounting the focus wheel to the RS4 is really easy to do because Tilta worked with DJI to make them compatible. And there's these little pins on the inside of this wheel that need to line up here on the M4 mount. So you just kind of slide and pivot this on and then lock the wheel. And to confirm that the pins are actually lined up, could go ahead and power it on with the little red button. And I can see on the battery indicator that there's a little lightning bolt. That means that it's getting power from the gimbal itself. And you can already see how nice this focus wheel looks. It matches the gimbal setup perfectly, and it's really comfortable and easy to hold. Let's get the focus motor mounted now. So what I'm using is a 6-inch 15mm rod from SmallRig, and I'm just running it through the top of my cage here. Mine has a little 15mm rod adapter on the top, But if your cage doesn't have this, you can add little adapters. The Nucleus Nano kit actually comes with a mount for 15mm rods, and certain DJI models also come with it when you get the RS4 Pro. It just depends on your setup, but you're gonna need a spot to mount it. And then we just need to plug everything in. So I'm using a USB-C to USB-C cable, and I'm gonna plug this into port 1. And this will give power to the motor, and I'm going to plug it into the gimbal right here in the front. And then we're gonna use another USB-C cable, and this is optional, but I like to do this and I'll tell you why. So I'm gonna plug it into the second port on the motor, and then I'm gonna plug it directly into the side of the Sony FX3. This isn't gonna work with every camera model, so you'll need to look up your camera to see if it's supported, but this is gonna give us control over the camera while using the focus wheel. This is pretty cool. So everything's balanced and looking good. One of the first things you need to do when you're using a manual focus lens is calibrate the lens. So you can hold down the function button on the wheel for 3 seconds, and it'll automatically start the calibration process. So it's gonna go and hit those hard stops, A and B, and there we go. It's fully calibrated now. So now we can focus the lens from infinity to near focus very easily with the wheel. And I can see everything that I'm doing very clearly on this 5-inch monitor, so I can just turn this wheel as gentle as I need to and nail my focus. Now, another really cool feature about this setup is that you can actually trigger recording from the focus wheel. Because I plugged in that USB-C cable directly into the FX3, I can actually hit the record button here, and you just heard it, ding, now it's recording. You can see the red light there, and that's really convenient because when you want to start and stop really quickly, you don't have to put your hand up here on the camera. You can just keep your hand on the focus wheel and hit that record button on and off as much as you need. Now, if you're recording directly onto the Ninja 5, you are going to have to tap the record button there and then tap it off. But that's the nature of using an external recorder. If you want to see the exact instructions on how to connect your camera model to the focus wheel, Tilta has a great video on it that I'll link in the description explaining it for each camera model. Now, of course, you can add other things to your gimbal setup if you need them, but when I'm using manual focus lenses, this is really all that I need. However, if I am shooting a live event, a lot of times I'll add a wireless transmitter, and that's really easy to do. You can just throw it right onto the cold shoe here, and then if you need it to stay out of the way of the lens, you can actually just bend it down here out of the way, and that works perfectly fine for me. And one other thing you might need to add to your gimbal setup is a wireless microphone. So this is the Rode Wireless Pro, and what I love about this is it's so light that I can easily throw it on top of my gimbal. I have a little cold shoe here on the top. You probably have a cold shoe somewhere on your setup as well. So I could slide this in, and then you just run the 3.5mm cable from here into the camera, and that's it. It is a little bit heavier of a set than I normally like to rock, but when you're using fully manual focus lenses, you've got to add the extra things like the wheel, the motor, the 15mm rods, and of course that all adds a substantial amount of weight. And one other major reason that I switched to the RS4 is the fact that you can remove the battery grip and then mount the rest of the gimbal on top of the new iFootage Shark Slider Nano II. And with that, you have full 5-axis gimbal and slider control, and you can get some really unique shots. If you want to pick up any of the gear that I talked about in this video, it's all linked down below. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video.